Well, hello, everyone. This is Monk Chat from Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Venerable Wade Buripano, and I have with me Bhante J, well-known friend of Empty Cloud. So for the program for Monk Chat, we don't have any formal talk, but it's simply a question and answer period. So an opportunity for you to type in your questions that you may have about Buddhism, anything related to Buddhism, and we'll try our best to answer them. We also have a few yogis here in the monastery who will give them an opportunity to ask questions as well. It looks like we already have some Anjalis and even a question coming in already. I wonder, Bhante J, should we just go ahead and start?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is, Dear Venerables, is it acceptable to have a butterfly kit for my kindergarten students? We raise them from caterpillars to butterflies, but I might make a mistake and they might die. Thank you. Invite you, Bhante J, if you have
Okay. Well, I don't know what I've never had experienced a butterfly kit, so I don't really know the details of it. But if you are like raising them to butterflies and then they just go and fly away or whatever, that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. And if if remember the intention is where it's important. So if you unintentionally end up killing a butterfly, it's this, I would say it's okay in terms of karma. It's not bad karma. But you want to try to minimize that as much as possible, and understand ways to make sure that doesn't happen again in the future. But and it's also a good thing for little kids. If a little kid does end up killing a butterfly, well, then that kid can also learn, because most little kids tend to not want creatures to die. So that could be a learning lesson for them, and they'll be able to take care of the butterfly better. That's pretty much all I have to say about that.
Okay. Should we take the next question?
Sure.
Okay. I don't know if I'm as good at operating this as you are.
It's using a trackpad is not optimal.
It's funny. I feel like I'm doing it right, but
actually, you should be able to just don't even have to press. Thankfully,
just scroll. Okay.
Yeah, but that makes it still a little wonky.
Sorry, everybody. I'm not very tech savvy, so I'm a little bit clumsy here.
Welcome, Sud, Karuna, Metika, Amaranta, Difference.
Difference is spreading, right?
All right. Sud has a question, I think, here.
Dear Venerables, how should one understand Sankaras and their relationship to karma? And how should one view Sankaras per Buddha? Okay. I'm not sure I understand what it means, Sankaras per Buddha. I think the first half of the question I understand pretty well. But what do you think is meant by Sankaras per Buddha? Okay.
No idea. I might possibly is it related to Sankaras and the Buddha after Parinibbana? Maybe that's they're trying to figure out some kind of sneaky way of that. I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah.
Maybe we could take a swing at the first part of the question, Sankaras and their relationship to karma, and then maybe we ask Sud if you type in an explanation of what you mean by Sankaras per Buddha. We can try to answer that one later also. Well, so Sankaras, the term Sankaras in the Pali and the suttas has a few different meanings. In relationship to karma, the meaning that's usually referred to is formations of body, speech, and mind, meaning basically our intentional actions of body, speech, and mind. And this is, according to the suttas, the definition of the word Sankaras in Paticcasamuppada, for example. So we have avijja paccaya sankara, sankara paccaya vijnana, is with ignorance as a condition, sankaras arise. And with sankaras as a condition, then consciousness arises. And sankaras in this case, according to the definition in the suttas, is volitional actions of body, speech, and mind. So this, of course, is directly related to karma, because intentional actions of body, speech, and mind are karma itself, according to the sutta definition. This is, so you could actually say, another way of saying this is formula paticca samuppada. With ignorance as a condition, we make karma, and then this conditions us coming back in the round of rebirths over and over again. Of course, we can make good karma, we can make bad karma. And then there are other kinds of mixed karma, and there's even karma that goes beyond karma, like following the Noble Eightfold Path to completion. So as long as we're not perfectly wise like the Buddha, we're going to be making karma, and that's going to have results for us here in samsara. And so we want to really try to focus on the skillful actions of body, speech, and mind, those kinds of sankaras.
So yeah, he said no, just as he wanted to understand sankaras based on the teaching of the Buddha. That's all. So okay. No kind of sneaky way of trying to figure out. No, just Okay. Yeah. I suspected Suta's been around Bhante Sudaso and Nayasoma for long enough that he wouldn't have such views, but just in case. Well,
so I wonder if so that's my understanding of sankaras in relation to karma, and as the Buddha was teaching about them, at least in this sense. There are other meanings of the word sankara, but I don't know if we need to get into those in relation to this question. Maybe that's sufficient then for this.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. If you could.
Sure.
You're much better at the controls than that.
No worries.
Okay. Dear Venerables, are animals and plants inferior beings in Buddhism? Okay. What do you think, then?
Depends on what you mean by inferior. When you really fully understand this samsaric journey, there's no essence. Like, a being is a being is a being. Right? A deva, a human, an animal, whatever. It's all just beings in samsara. Right? So in that way, it doesn't matter. There's no inferior, superior. In terms of rebirth, then obviously, yes, an animal realm would be a lower rebirth. It's because it's a much more instinctual, life. It's a much less able to practice the Dhamma and to hear the Dhamma and all these kind of things. So in that way, it's an inferior rebirth. It's like, this is not something that you would want to do. It's like, I remember growing up, my family's Catholic, but even my dad, we'd be like looking at the family dog, and my dad would be like, if I have to come back again, I want to come back as a dog. Right? Because his idea is, dogs just get to lay around all day and it's all fun. They don't have to work and do all these kind of things. From the Buddhist perspective, you do not want to come back as a dog. Right? You want to at least come back as a human, so that you can, hear the Dhamma and practice the Dhamma. So in that way, you do not want to be born as one of these lower realms beings, like animals or fetus, ghosts, and different beings like that. You do not want to be born. This is considered to be an inferior birth. But in terms of just beings in samsara, there's I'm greater than, I'm less than, I'm equal to is all conceit in this way. In terms of plants are not considered sentient beings. They're considered one faculty life. So they are considered life, but they're not considered sentient. You cannot be reborn as a plant, nor is there any samsaric mechanism for a plant to be born as a human. This is not considered to be part of the samsaric journey.
All right. I don't want to mess anything up, so I'll touch the keyboard.
No worries. So difference is spreading is just asking for a blast of metta to them and all beings I have harmed in my life may be included in a chant at some point. Well, chances are you've probably harmed every other being in samsara, and every being in samsara has harmed you. So at some point you just go up to, may all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. Yes, this is a very good thing to practice lots of metta. So practice lots of metta, and you can be part of our metta as well. And the more of us who practice metta, then we will refrain from harming beings in the future, because we'll refrain from having ill will, right? And hatred and aversion towards other beings.
All right. Amaranta says, thank you. Did we answer a question for her already? Oh, I think that's yes. Right, we did.
Okay. All right. Well, we're out of questions. Have a good night. See you later. Are there any questions from the live studio audience?
A few words on acceptance, maybe advice on acceptance. Like if you encounter a misfortune and you're aware that resisting it will compound it, but you can't bring yourself to just wholeheartedly accept and not keep messing with it, intervening, tinkering with it. Any words of advice on that?
Okay. So there's something that you're not quite comfortable with, in the sense that you wish it were better, or you're just satisfied with it, and so you feel an urge to keep tinkering with it, keep trying to adjust it, and make it better. Is that
like, for an illustrative example? Imagine you make a really stupid mistake and you lose your hand because of it. And then and then you go, oh no, I wish I didn't make that stupid mistake. I hope this isn't real. I hope I didn't actually lose my hand. So it seems like, from my perspective, in such a situation, the wise thing to do is, as quick as you can, accept it and adapt. But anything like that. So, so to answer your question, yes.
I see. Oh, that's a little bit different how I understood it first. So thanks for the clarification. Yeah. Well, okay. So I think there's two aspects of this that come to mind initially. One is that while we can try and think about ideas for how to let go in the moment, this is my way of one way of looking at acceptance, letting go, is that if we've lost our hand and we're experiencing some denial, we might try to offer advice, but if you're actually genuinely in denial about it, let's say if we're to that extent, it's very hard to take advice that says, you really have a problem. So we could talk about, for example, if you could contemplate impermanence, and practice some mindfulness, so you see things clearly, what they really are, and if you can contemplate impermanence, in relation to this particular episode, for example, with the hand and the body is naturally impermanent, then this can help you to kind of let go, But if you can't accept it in the sense that you're in denial, which is a very normal human reaction, that is quite problematic, I think, for situations like this, in aging and death. I've seen people going through the aging and death kind of process, if you will, and having a hard time adapting to it and dealing with the situation in productive ways, in ways that reduce their suffering, because they're actually in denial about it happening in the first place, And so I think from that point of view, it's good to have your kind of fundamental Buddhist practices in place over time, and to keep practicing over time in preparation for these kinds of suffering. So, for example, we have the 5 subjects of frequent recollection. As we reflect on these frequently, they kind of seep into the heart, and the heart, which is the one that produces things like denial, has a chance to learn about these things over time. So when we encounter them for real, then the heart is more apt to accept them. Also, the meditation practice is very, very beneficial for this. So if you practice 20 minutes a day, for example, which has so many other benefits as well, and the Buddha recommended that for those who are in lay life to practice the opposita day, is an integral part of lay life, as we have it in the suttas. And so something like a one-day retreat each week, which can be tailored to one's own kind of lifestyle and way of practicing, having these fundamental practices in place, I think, are really essential for dealing with extreme suffering skillfully, like losing your hand, for example. If we find ourselves in that kind of a situation and people are offering us tips and tricks for how to deal with it, we may or may not really be able to put them into practice. But again, if these kinds of things happen, and if you can slowly over time reflect on impermanence, for example, that's one way of doing it, I think.
I can add on to it. As opposed to the denial aspect, more like things that compound it, like sense of failure, regret, lament, shame.
Because you said, for example, if it happens as a result of doing something stupid.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Right. Well, the thing about that is that it is so normal and human, even the smartest people do stupid things. And it's funny how we identify with these kinds of things, I myself, sometimes I do something that seems so brilliant at the time. I say, oh, I'm a genius. How did I think of that? And then an hour later, I do something so stupid. I say, oh, I'm such an idiot. And so we get elated, and then we beat ourselves up, and we go up and down throughout the day, and identifying ourselves in different ways, identifying with different things that we do. And so if we can contemplate kind of the normalcy of this, all of these things are very normal, even Einstein was known for doing really kind of things that seemed kind of foolish. He had a tendency, they say, to lock himself out of his apartment. And so he'd have to keep going to his landlady and ask her, please, can you let me into my apartment? I lock myself out again, this kind of thing. Or he'd be going out to an appointment, so he'd be off riding the bus, and then he'd get off at some stop, and he'd have to call up his wife and say, where am I? And where is it that I'm going? Because he forgot even where he was supposed to be going to, because he's probably absorbed some thought about physics or something. And so this kind of thing is very normal.
I'm going to let her out, or let him out.
Teddy, the monastic cat, has locked himself in the closet accidentally. He got in the door. See? So it's so normal, even for living beings to make silly mistakes. He's illustrating. We should call him Einstein from now on. That's right. We should call him Einstein from now on. How about that? And
honestly, I thought that he wanted it that way. He's like, get away from me, and close the door on all of us. But I guess it was an accident. Anyway.
Sure, yeah. So that's a reflection. If you think about it time to time, the normalcy of it, it's quite normal. And
All right. Chadni says, Bhante, do you have any kind of advice for the grieving process? We lost our father 3 weeks ago. So for the grieving process, it's important to just let the process play out as it does. Don't try to, force it or suppress it or expect certain things like, oh, I should be crying right now. Why am I not crying? Or these kind of things. Because each person's process is going to play out in different ways. And the idea is just to be with it, just to observe it, just to watch it happen, and let the process go through. Let your mind go through the normal process it needs to go through to complete the grieving process and to move forward. The other thing, in terms of when you lose somebody, it's a very good thing to do something in their honor. This is in Buddhism, we it's typical, like they'll give a dana and monks will give a blessing or whatever. And, whether you think the blessing does anything or not is not really the point per se. Really what the point is that you're doing something good in somebody's honor. Right? Even I grew up Christian, Catholic, and what you would do is you'd have a mass said for somebody, right? Basically the same thing. So different religions, different, humanity has figured out different ways for people to do how to deal with somebody's death. And so doing good deeds in their name is a very, very good thing to do. Right? It's, especially if you do good deeds as a family. Maybe your father died of a certain disease or whatever, like cancer, and you want to do something with the American Cancer Society or, something to that effect. Doing some kind of good deed together as a family in the person's name is usually a very good thing to do. It's very, it brings the family together for bonding, and it helps with the grieving process. So I guess that's about it. Like I said, the most important thing is not to have any expectations of what it should be. Just allow it to be. Don't try to force it. Don't try to control it. Don't try to manipulate it. No expectations. Just allow yourself to go through it. And if you are a meditator, this is a wonderful, wonderful experience to investigate, to understand. Right? This is something that I highly encourage anybody. If you are a meditator, if you want to really examine things as they are, if you have a loved one or yourself going through the death process, be with that person, observe it, don't run away from it. Try not to hide from it, because this is normal people. This is what we want. We don't want to have to experience these things. But as Buddhist practitioners, as meditators, we want to understand these experiences. As we get older, we have obviously more and more people around us die that we know. But as we're younger, that can be a rare thing. And so this is something always very important to use as a reflection, right? The Buddha called old age, sickness, and death divine messengers. And we avoid and we ignore those divine messengers at our own peril. And so when you see old age, sickness, and death, investigate it, understand it, and learn what you can from it. We got a bunch of questions now.
Which came in, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Karuna has a question. Tom?
Okay. I'm practicing Opposita today. Sadhu. And experiencing aversion to feeling deprived. Okay. Could you suggest ways to approach it with the spirit the Buddha intended, especially when feeling ill will? There's an M at the end. I wonder if part of this got cut off, or if it was just a typo, or it may just be a typo.
Doesn't look like there's anything after that.
Okay. It seems like a complete question. So, all right. Well, so I'm always talking about how people should follow the Opposita day, and Karuna is doing it, and now she's saying she's really disliking it. So I guess it's only fair that I should have to answer a question about it and try to help. So, but I guess this is quite a natural. Could be quite a natural reaction. So I'm sorry you're having this kind of an experience. When you say deprived, I'm assuming that you mean in relation to following the precepts. So with the 8 precepts on the Opposita day, which I assume you're following, because you're saying you're following the Opposita day. If you're doing the 8 precepts, then they entail, in addition to the 5 precepts, complete celibacy, refraining from eating past midday, and not indulging in entertainment or self-beautification, and for not using high or ostentatious or imposing furniture for sleeping or sitting. And so, so some of these can seem like quite a bit of deprivation. For example, not eating past midday. And I had some, I followed the Opposita day for many years when I was in lay life, and not eating past midday sometimes could seem quite difficult to me. I'd be quite hungry in the evening sometimes, and sometimes it happens in monastic life as well. And so the other things going on, the other kinds of precepts you're following may make you feel deprived as well. There's common in culture now the fear of missing out. I've been told, something I learned about since coming back from Thailand a few months ago. FOMO, fear of missing out. So if you're not able to kind of do the kind of entertainment stuff that you like to do, or socializing, for example. The term has been coined here at Empty Cloud, the joy of missing out, or JOMO, which is that actually if you don't get involved in all that kind of stuff, and you follow the spiritual practices, then you can experience even greater pleasures than you can get from those other things. One thing we can do is reflect on, and it's something that the masters would draw our attention to when we are complaining about how things were back in Thailand, is, well, those things that you want to do, well, how many times have you done them already? Okay. And then, and where did it get you in life, kind of thing? And where has it gotten you? That kind of stuff, and think about, well, why is it that you got interested in spiritual practice in the first place, and why is it you decided to give the opposite day a try if you were already so blissfully happy and satisfied with the way things were before? So, and if that's this one kind of a reflection. Another kind of reflection is you can think, well, this is doing the opposite day. It's only for one day, and we have 6 other whole days to do all the other stuff, that we want to do or that we have to do, and all this kind of thing, And so, just putting one day aside for this is not so much. And another reflection is that if you do it for one day, you're not committed to doing it every week for the rest of your life. If you do it every once in a while and you feel like that's all you can really stand of it, then you can be satisfied that doing it to that extent, you're developing quite a bit of parami, the spiritual virtue, through whether it's enduring the situation or practicing the meditation. If you keep the sila well, there's sila parami as well that you develop. And all of these are really wonderful raw materials for the spiritual life. And they say that these are never reduced. Once you develop this parami, you don't lose it. When you die, for example, as you will eventually be parted from everything else in this life. And so these are treasures within you that you will have. Even from doing it just for one day, you'll experience some benefit from this in that way. So I oftentimes found when I was doing the opposite day, it would be difficult in the mornings to get on board with it. And I oftentimes had to leave, or usually left my apartment that I was staying in, for example, so I wouldn't be distracted by other things. I'd go to someplace conducive to meditation, like a meditation center. I'd even just go out into the woods and meditate at the foot of a tree, this kind of a thing, And I found that throughout the day, it would get easier and easier. And I felt better and better. And if it got into the evening, even if I was hungry, for example, I would notice that actually my mind is much calmer, and actually I feel so much better internally. And it feels like the difficulties associated with hunger, for example, are actually quite small compared to the benefits I'm getting from this. And so that's what's sustaining me in the practice. And I hope you have a similar kind of experience, or at least you'll be satisfied that at least you did it for this one day, and that's a lot of benefit in that, and can reassess whether to do it again or not. So I can offer that.
Julie says, what's the reason monks cannot cut plants? Not to harm insects, not to destroy devas' homes. Basically, yes. That's so. There's the 2 rules are related to digging and related to trees. Actually, there's multiple rules. One of the rules is we can't start a fire, and the reason that rule started is because monks started a fire in a tree. And it didn't go well for the inhabitants of the tree. So yes, this is why these things have come down, because they were considered and seen as not good in the community and the culture at the time. So that we would not do things that would cause harm to smaller beings. I have a question on Buddhas.
Okay, right. Happy Smiley asks, are there many Buddhas or only 7 Buddhas?
Suda to 2 brothers. I don't know what that means.
Okay, maybe I wonder if they mean sadhu to 2 brothers, meaning 2 monks. Two brother monks.
Gotcha.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
So I guess Q&A discussion. Some thumbs up for the Q&A discussion, and metta with a heart. Okay. glad to see you're enjoying it. Are there many Buddhas or only 7 Buddhas? That could turn into quite a complicated question and answer, I think. Depends on how you look at it to some degree. For example, in some traditions, they have many Buddhas. Let's see, if I go back to if I start out by going back to kind of what the Pali Suttas say, they say that there are many Buddhas throughout the many eons in samsara, and the Buddha, according to the sutta, said that he looked back. I think it was 91 incalculable eons, which is this fantastic, unimaginable amount of time, and he did not find a beginning point, but that Buddhas arise from time to time. And so the Buddha of our history, the Gautama Buddha, is just one in a long lineage of Buddhas, you could say. And he said that the next one, according to the Pali Suttas, will be a king of Buddhas, the Maitreya Buddha, will come far in the future when human beings have a lifespan of 80,000 years. Now, you mentioned 7 Buddhas, and I'm not sure why 7, but according to the Pali, as I recall, there are 5 Buddhas in this, what is called a fortunate eon, because there are some eons where there aren't even any Buddhas. And 5 is a relatively high number of Buddhas to have in an eon, which is a lesson or a teaching on how precious it is to be alive as a human being and come in contact with the Buddha's teachings, because they come about very, very infrequently and they last a relatively short time. So the vast majority of time, we don't have, for example, the Four Noble Truths to guide us. So according to the Pali, there are 5 in this eon. I've heard a teaching that some say that there are actually 7 in this eon, but I can't substantiate that. And I don't know. So I don't know why you say 7. I wonder if Bhante J, if you might know something about the number 7. Okay.
No.
Okay. And then so another aspect of this is that some other traditions have many, many, many Buddhas who are like celestial Buddhas I know very little about. Some say the Amitabha Buddha, for example, is up in the Western Paradise in the two-seated heaven. And so even though he attained enlightenment a long time ago, he is going to live, I think it's through the remainder of this eon in the Western Paradise, still helping living beings attain enlightenment there. There's another Buddha called the Medicine Buddha, a Tibetan tradition Buddha in the Eastern Paradise, if I recall correctly, also in the two-seated heaven, who has a special mission to help living beings with their health so that they can pursue the spiritual path. And so I'm not very well versed in Tibetan Buddhism, but they have many, many, many Buddhas still active here in samsara, helping living beings across the ocean to Nibbana. I wonder if you have anything to add on that. Okay.
No.
Okay.
In Buddhism, at what time during pregnancy does the reincarnating soul enter the fetus? Well, first of all, I have to destroy reincarnating in soul. It doesn't really have anything to do with the question per se. But again, the reincarnation is not the word we use in Buddhism. We use bhava, or rebirth, or re-becoming, or re-existence, because reincarnation is more connected to Hinduism. And there's no soul. There's no permanent essence in Buddhism. So semantical maybe, whatever, but that's an important thing to understand. And this is a question that is answered in the suttas. So the Buddha says that when the meeting of the 3 come together, so the woman is fertile, the man and woman come together in sexual union, and there is the being ready to be reborn. When these 3 things come together, then the consciousness enters the womb. And so it's the beginning of the section there that happens.
Maybe I should confess, and I can't quite read the name. I sometimes use the word soul myself. So it's true. It's very uncommon. It's maybe idiosyncratic to me in Theravada Buddhism. Sometimes I use the word soul. So, so if you've heard me saying it here, you have to know it's idiosyncratic. I use it kind of interchangeably with mind or heart. So. Okay. Sadhu.
Here's an interesting question from our friend Shadow of Label, who's an interesting character who asks wonderful questions.
Very enigmatic name, huh?
Yeah.
Mysterious.
Yeah. He is very mysterious, or she is very mysterious, one or the other. We don't know. It's Shadow of Label.
Okay. I had a friend make strawberry pizza. Would you guys eat strawberry pizza donated to you? Sure. Okay, that was easy.
I mean, they make pineapple pizza. I mean, is there that much difference?
That's right. I guess that's easy enough. Yeah. Okay.
Since that was a kind of a quick one, Tom, maybe you can.
Yeah, I thought I got off easy. I don't know if I can read this. I'm still giggling. All right, please.
Bante's. So this is addressed to both of us, so maybe we can both answer this one. My practice tends to get worse as my sexual inclination increases. Is there a pleasant way to bear the sexual urge correctly without creating a lot of disturbance? I'm 20 years old. I can talk to this. So this is one of the first things that we need to understand as practitioners is that we're born into this body. Right? We are born into this being called human being, at least in this lifetime. And this human being, like most human beings, or like most animals, like most beings, has certain drives that keep it alive. Right? The drive to eat, the drive to sleep, the drive to have sex. These are drives. This is normal. And because of it, you haven't attained awakening yet, guess what? You're stuck in this body. And you have to deal with these urges and these drives that come along. So the first thing to do is to understand this, right? Not to, especially young guys, what I see is they kind of create like an adversarial view towards their sexuality, especially if they're kind of thinking about being a monastic and they're thinking about, because, especially when you're young guys, it can be very, very strong. And we can do lots of stupid things because of our sex drives and things like that. That's kind of normal, right? That's how it is. So the important thing to do is to understand this. And once you understand it, then you can start to think of ways to deal with it, right? To handle it, right? How can I channel this energy in skillful ways? Right? How can I make sure that, and again, you're a lay person, so lay people are not required or expected to be celibate, but you still have to, worry about michachara, kamesu michachara, which is unskillful sexual action, right? You have to, be able to make sure that whatever sexuality you engage in is skillful. Right? It is not harmful to yourself and others. So in that takes work. That's to be able to do that. Right? There's a reason why this is one of the precepts. Right? So because you are, taking work, you are choosing to make sure that all of your sexual activity is skillful. And if you are choosing or trying out a brahmacharya, which means the full chastity, full celibacy, well, then that's another step. That's a next step where you have to, really observe when it arises. Why do you feel? Why is this desire arising? What triggers cause it to arise? And what can I do? You mentioned something about, right, is there a pleasant way to bear the sexual urge? There's very few pleasant ways to bear any unpleasant experience, right? This is why the Buddha says, Kanti paramang tapotitika, right? Patient endurance is the best practice. To being able to patiently endure and to be with, in this case would be pleasant or unpleasant experiences, right? And we have to make that reflection of why we are choosing not to engage with this desire, with this craving, with this impulse. Reflecting on those reasons. Why are we choosing not to? Right? The Buddha will reflect on monastics having a brahmacharya or brahmacharya lifestyle. Saying that this is the way of the villagers. Right? This is the layperson's way. This is not the monastic way. Right? You're supposed to be better than this. So, and obviously it's the number one rule, not to break too. But, this is a kind of a reflection on this is not something that you should be engaging in. You're supposed to be better. So try to be better. So it's a matter of really trying to understand your urges, and it's trial and error. You know, you think, okay, well, maybe this time I'm going to try this, and that didn't work. Well, next time you have to try something else. You know, this is one of the things that people try, is having adversarial relationship, right? And that's not good. You know, having adversarial relationship with your own body and drives, or having an adversarial relationship to whoever you're attracted to, you know, men or women or whatever. You know, that is usually not the skillful way to go. That usually only breeds aversion and ill will, and actually causes you to have less ability to control your desires and urges. So, Tom.
I don't know. Oh well, I don't know if you need me to say something too.
Or no, you don't have to if you don't have anything. Just,
yeah. Go ahead.
All right. Hello, Rick. Welcome.
One thing I might say is, if I think it's a really good question. I'd like to say that, and if it is quite it's a difficult thing to work with, you know. And so, if you have more questions in the future, don't hesitate to write in about this if you want to hear more about this topic in the future after practicing with what Bhante's already said. Sound good?
Okay. Rick has a question.
Bhantes, can you share some reflections on the relationship between delusion and the hindrance of doubt? Thank you. Okay. Between delusion and the hindrance of doubt. Let's see. So, right. So the hindrance of doubt is uncertainty in the mind about this or that. As far as I recall, in the Pali, it's not very clearly defined as anything in particular, except that it's doubt. Sometimes there's confusion about this doubt and the kind of doubt that the fetter, one of the fetters that Sotapanna cuts upon the attainment of Sotapanna, which is more doubt about specifically about the Buddhist teachings, for example. And so, say having practiced the path to the attainment of Sotapanna, then the Sotapanna has well-founded faith in the Triple Gem, and so they have the faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. But the hindrance of doubt, they could still have the hindrance of doubt in regard to any variety of things when practicing meditation, as a Puthajjana can as well, kind of a regular person. And so, for example, if we're practicing meditation, trying to, which is assuming this, you're asking about while meditating, since you mentioned the hindrances, and the hindrances are typically referred to in regard to meditation practice. They're unskillful mental states that we have to go beyond in order to attain unification of mind and see things clearly, to practice vipassana. And so delusion is one of, doubt is one of them. And delusion, on the other hand, is a term used for one of the three kilesas, or three unskillful roots of action, greed, aversion, and delusion, which can have, to some degree, kind of a technical definition, like not seeing the Four Noble Truths, or it can be more have a broader kind of application, which I think is more generally the case, where it's just simply not really being aware or experiencing reality as it is in the present moment. And because of that, having distorted perception, because delusion is clouding the mind, perceiving that which is impermanent as being permanent, that which is unsatisfying as being satisfying, or it could be translated as that which is difficult to bear or painful as being pleasant. Then the third one being perceiving that which is not self as being the self. And the fourth one being perceiving that which is repulsive as being beautiful. And so I think with this kind of delusion in the mind, we can kind of get caught up in thinking a little bit too much. Delusion is also kind of related to speculative thinking, as opposed to like a clear knowing in the present of what's actually happening. If we're practicing meditation and we're trying to get to a point where the mind is unified and we're trying to investigate reality, investigate what's going on, then basically what we're trying to do is cultivate this clear knowing so we can see reality as it really is. Whereas doubt and delusion are kind of the opposite of this. Doubting, thinking, is this the right way or is that the right way? Is that right or is this right? Or I'm not sure if this is right, and so on like this, is clearly the opposite, or it's not affiliated with a clear knowing in the present moment of what's actually happening. And so if we recognize this, this doubt itself is the opposite of the kind of quality I'm trying to cultivate. And then simply go back to the meditation theme that we have, and see through testing with the meditation object, does it actually lead to the kind of results we want? And the process of doubting and thinking about it will not actually tell us. It's a very uncertain process. But the process of actually trying to follow the instructions and seeing what kind of result we get is a much more sure process. As well as consulting a teacher, of course, if we have some difficulties in getting the results that we want. Perhaps that's
all right. So, okay. So, Mark, you say any ideas what Ajahn meant by this? My question is which Ajahn? Please tell, because this is actually, I know exactly whatever Ajahn is talking about here. I know exactly what this Ajahn is talking about. So the quote is, we never stop putting effort into practice. Whether the progress is swift or slow is out of our control. It's just like planting a tree. This is 100% correct. Right? I'll give you an example of my own. This is an insight that I've gained now only in the last maybe 3 years out of almost 20 years of practice. I remember, 10 years ago, I was so zealous. I was going to be like, I'm going to become awakened in this very lifetime. And then I got to the point where I realized, actually, wait, I don't know if I'm going to be awakened in this lifetime. I don't know if I'm actually ready. Yeah, I mean, I can practice fervently, for like 15 hours a day for the next 40 years. And I might not be ready to become awakened in this lifetime. And that's what Ajahn talking about here. Whether progress is swift or slow is out of our control. There's all kinds of karmic causes and conditions that are behind us becoming awakened. Okay? So all we know, and I learned this actually many years ago, even before this kind of insight about the becoming awakened. What I learned was that insights arose on the path totally in their own time and place, and their own causes and conditions. You could go to a 2-month or 3-month retreat. You're like, oh, I'm practicing so well. And at the end of the retreat, there's no magical insights. There's no, oh my God, none of that happens. And then 2 years later, you're online at on a supermarket, and there's an annoying person in front of you. And all of a sudden, boom, you just have this huge insight and you're like, whoa. Okay? There's no direct correlation between I'm going to go on this huge, meditation retreat and get all kinds of insight and actual insight arising. So what you do is, well, how do I become awakened? Well, the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. Okay, so now I follow the Noble Eightfold Path. I'm going to do my best to follow the Noble Eightfold Path to the best of my ability every day for this life. Where I end up, I don't know. But I do know that if I keep following the path, I will become awakened eventually. So that's what this Ajahn is talking about here, right? You plant the tree. How are you planting a tree? How you're setting the seeds, setting the root. That's your practice. Your practice is setting the seeds. You're sowing the ground. That's what bhavana means. Bhavana, to cultivate. Right? Your practice cultivates. But you can't, if you've ever farmed anything, if you've grown anything, you can't control. You can't say, well, today you're going to grow X amount of centimeters. No, you can't do that. You can maybe tie it to posts and do all kinds of things to try to, to kind of guide how it grows. But how fast it's going to grow and not necessarily under your control. Now, smart Alec might say, well, if I use fertilizer, et cetera, maybe. Yeah, but that's not necessarily reality in terms of when it comes to the practice. I just want to scroll ahead here to see if Mark responds. Ajahn Chah. I knew it had to be Ajahn Chah. That's definitely an Ajahn Chah quote. Yes. Yeah, Ajahn Chah, as usual, is right. All right. Yeah, we want to answer a question about Mahayana monastics. Both Mahayana and Theravada, different.
Okay, so Joy is saying, asking, why can Mahayana monastics cook for themselves and Theravada monastics cannot? There are many differences in both Vinaya. Why? Which one did the Buddha teach? Well, I don't know anything about the Mahayana Vinaya really, and I don't. So I don't know. I don't even know if they could cook for themselves. There was an allowance for that. So I have to say I don't know. Why is it the Theravada monastics cannot? Is generally the idea is that the thinking on the food rules for Theravada monastics, according to our Patimokkha, we have these rules saying that we can only eat food that's offered to us. We have to eat it only offered to us between dawn and midday, and we have to eat it within that time frame as well. And we're not allowed to cook. The thinking on this is that probably the Buddha made these rules so that we would have to have a close enough relationship with the lady, that there was some relationship between us, and the monastics didn't just go off and wrap themselves up in a spiritual cocoon somewhere or something like this. And of course, it's a way for lay people to make merit, even every single day, in support of the religion, in honor of the Buddha, and so on like this, which we could find very inspiring. But I don't know anything about the Mahayana Vinaya, what's going on there. So, if you do you know, Bhante?
No, not. I mean, I vaguely know how, like, when Buddhism came to China, because of the conditions and the way it was in China, that's kind of how monastics were allowed to cook. I mean, there is in the Vinaya, there is precedent for the Buddha allowing monastics to cook. He allowed the monastics to cook for a certain time during like a famine, I think it was, and then he rescinded it. So there is precedent for certain allowances for monastics to cook, and in many places in the Buddhist world, monastics do cook. But for those who are trying to be very strict with Vinaya, then monastics wouldn't cook. Do you know anything about the Tibetan monastics that become preserved and all that kind of stuff? This is kind of a question about that, I guess. I don't know. Rainbow body? Do you don't know?
Right.
Yeah,
So
I don't know anything about that.
I know something about there's this thing in amongst a number of masters in Thailand, also in bodhisattvas. They say that their bodies don't decompose. A friend of mine who is so the question is about, maybe I should read the question. The bodies of some Tibetan monks remain fresh, in quotation marks, after what appears to be their death for 2 weeks, and sometime their bodies shrink. Are they in the process of rainbow body or something else?
And there's more.
Isn't it more? Okay. The bodies of some or is it a duplicate?
Oh no, it is a duplicate.
It's a
okay.
duplicate.
All right.
Yeah. So yes, I don't know exactly what the term rainbow body means, and I have to say my background is in Theravada Buddhism, really, but there's this phenomena in Thailand also, to some extent or other, in terms of bodies not decomposing. Apparently there's according to the folklore, if someone's got a lot of parami, whether they're an arhat or an anagami or a bodhisattva, then they can make a determination before they pass away for their body to not decompose, and then it'll be there for people to worship, and also as inspiration for faith in the power of meditation. I actually went in and worshipped at least two of these corpses, actually. I can't say I know for sure that they were the bodies of the deceased masters, but I've seen pictures of the bodies of deceased masters from China. Also, I think Wei Neng is one of them, a famous master from China. His body is not apparently is not decomposed from what they say. And a friend of mine in a Christian, devout Christian, says that there's some Christian saints apparently who have performed the same kind of miracle, and they have a term for it. It's called incorruptibility. And so, but it's all stuff that I can't really attest to myself, and it's all kind of based in faith, or at least this is what people say, kind of thing. So,
So the next question is, I'd like to go to Sutta Central to get the actual Pali and the translation of the word, because the way they ask the question is a bit weird for me. So. And go to Anapanasati Sutta. Oh.
Bhante is looking at the Anapanasati Sutta on Sutta Central, so that he can respond to a question. This has been typed in. Going to Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation on Sutta Central.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ah, okay, yeah, all right. I suspected that might be what it is, but I wanted to make sure I was. And the 9th step of mindfulness of breathing, what does it mean to be aware of the chitta? So it's breathing in, experiencing the mind, breathing out, experiencing the mind. So what this is, what might be good to kind of understand this is actually to see chitta nupassana in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So what are you experiencing in the mind? A mind with greed or a mind without greed? A mind with hatred or a mind without hatred? A mind with delusion, a mind without delusion? So you are experiencing the state of the mind, right? And if you've gotten to this point in Anapanasati Sutta, what you're usually experiencing is some deep tranquility. You're starting to see how the body has started to become tranquil. The mind has started to become tranquil. It's not chasing around, its likes and dislikes and getting so distracted as much. That's what this means. You're paying attention as you're breathing in and out. You're paying attention to the state of the mind. Yeah. And this is after you've done, after rapture and samadhi and tranquilization and all that stuff. Yeah, so this is pretty deep.
This is still his most recent translation. I thought he went back to, I thought this was originally what I was translating it years ago, but now he's translating it with just the whole body.
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know that he's,
that up,
yeah. Okay. That's a whole other debate
That's
in and
right.
of itself.
That's right.
Yeah.
A little side conversation quickly about the translations.
Yeah.
We don't want to go there now.
All right. Do you want to? Well, we're really getting the Mahayana
Yes,
questions today.
right.
This about every being Buddhas.
All beings are Buddhas. Okay, in Mahayana, all beings are Buddhas. Would you both brothers like to share your opinion? In Theravadan, thank you for being beautiful, happy monks. Wow. Okay. Okay. My understanding of this, because I have to admit, I don't know much about Mahayana, and so I can't say I know what the particular Mahayana masters meant by this. I can't say that I know. but I think from things I've picked up over the years that there's the idea that okay, let's get into a touchy territory in Theravada. Oh boy, I'm not sure I want to get into this. Okay, so I'm going to backpedal a little bit. Some of these things are kind of controversial. I use the term soul, and that's controversial. So,
Boy.
And so anyway, so well, there are also different teachings from the in different lineages within Theravada Buddhism. So, for example, the lineage of Ajahn Mun asserts that there is the chitta, meaning usually translated into English as the mind, and they say that is the one who knows within us, the one who cognizes sense objects, and that it's also the one that initiates mental formations, so emotions and thoughts and things like this. So the mind initiates these things, and it's the one that knows. And what they teach is that if the citta, it can expunge all the negative qualities and then go to nibbana, then basically the citta of any individual has the same characteristics as the citta of the Buddha. And so while they say that the citta is an unconditioned thing that is you cannot describe in conventional terms, they would take in order to try and teach their disciples, they would take different spins on it, while saying actually it's beyond any kind of description. You can kind of take an angle on it or something to highlight one aspect of the citta, and therefore, how to practice, for example. So they would talk about it in this way, that the heart, or the citta, the mind, in mental formations, that is like our emotions and thoughts and so on like this, are different things. Also, our sensory experience, or sense objects, they're all different things. And so we get into problems when we start initiating all these different kinds of mental formations, different thoughts and emotions and so on like this, and then getting involved with them, and then taking action based on them, often, usually in relation to sensory experience that we're having as well. The mind taking a hold of all of these things and identifying with them, getting emotionally involved with them as well. And they say that if you can meditate enough that you can see that the mind is separate from these things, the mind itself is in its normal state when it's at peace and when it gets unentangled from all these kinds of things, and it's kind of self-sufficient and it experiences a great deal of satisfaction and happiness. And this is the greatest kind of pleasure, like the kind of pleasure that the Buddha had when his citta became completely clear of all the defiling influences. So in this way, they kind of talk about how we all have, because we all have this citta, we all have the ability to attain enlightenment. We all have the ability to attain the same kind of awakening that the Buddha attained, and to experience the wonderful pleasure and happiness of enlightenment, just like he did.
Yeah, all I would say is this: is I don't believe that Mahayana says that all beings are Buddhas. I'm pretty sure they say that all beings have Buddha nature, right? So all beings can become Buddhas. But I don't know. I mean, and again, I could be totally off on that. But yeah, I think Tan gave a good explanation here. Welcome, Gayatri and Luke from Australia. Tawi and Ron. Kumu. Kumu, we kind of answered the question already, is why is harming plants and growing vegetables not allowed for bhikkhus? We kind of went over that.
If you want. It's up to you. I haven't seen your phones yet. Oh, okay, that's a good one, yeah. Right.
All right. Rick says, my ability to function has declined due to worsening chronic illness and aging. I'm now 60. How do we determine how much to push ourselves in our practice and in service of others? Thank you. You find a balance. Right? The Buddha says in the Dhammapada One should not sacrifice one's own welfare for the sake of another, no matter how great. Knowing what is good, one should take care of one's welfare. Right? So the Buddha is very clear in telling us that we shouldn't be, sacrificing ourselves. What we should be always is thinking about what is good for ourselves and others. Right? There's never about the Buddha when talks about like a person who practices, four kinds of person. One who practices for themselves, one who practices just for others, one who practices neither for themselves or others, which is my favorite because I wonder like why they're even practicing. But the fourth one is one who practices for both themselves and others. And the Buddha says the fourth is to be praised. And so whenever you are doing energy calculations, don't neglect yourself in that. Right? Because especially if you do have the desire to help others, you can only do so much in helping others if you are neglecting yourself. You don't have the energy, you don't have the ability, you don't have all of these things that you need to do. You don't have the goodwill because you're dealing with so much suffering in your own body that you're agitated. Right? These are not beneficial or helpful things to other people. Right? So you have to find the balance in your own body, within your own energy, within your own limitations. You have to find the balance. And once you find the balance, then you'll know I can put X amount of energy a day here and X amount of energy a day there. And that's all I can do. And I'm okay with that. Anything?
That's good. That's not true.
This actually might be good for you. This worked out, I think, good.
Okay.
The unconditioned chitta. I don't know. It's very Thai.
That?
So
that's right. That's very Thai force tradition.
Yeah.
Okay. Funny. This comes up after the last one. This is quite a coincidence. So Chad, and my brother's name is Chad. I have a brother named Chad. Chad asks, is this view of the unconditioned chitta similar to the Yogacara, Alaya Vijnana, and Theravada Bhavanga? That there's a constantly changing base which becomes all the mental phenomena. Okay. So I don't, I'm totally unfamiliar with Yogacara but based on your explanation, that there's a constantly changing base which becomes all the mental phenomena. So so I can speak to that, not being familiar with Yogacara. And they would say that the chitta does not become the mental phenomena. Okay, according to the lineage of Ajahn Mun, they would say that the unconditioned chitta and mental phenomena, meaning things like emotions and thoughts, and other kinds of mental states, like rapture, like piti, for example, or something like this, or energy, like the energy part of me, for example, and the chitta are separate things. Okay, maybe we'll leave it with that. Nice simple answer instead of getting into something complicated.
Kumu says, I got here late. Apologies. We'll listen to what I missed. Yeah. All right. So we have about 20 minutes left. We come to the end of questions. So we'll open it up to questions for people here. Give some time for anybody else who has questions online. And if there's no questions, then we'll end early.
I have a question. Is it weird to have fear of being outside Dhamma circles?
The question is it weird to have fear of being outside of Dharma circles?
Okay. I answer the last one.
All right. Well, it's itinerary, so we can both do. Okay. Yeah. It's just fear. It's just another way of fear. So yeah, what is fear? Fear is fear of some kind of loss, right? Some kind of either death or loss or something we're thinking in the future. It's like, oh, I might not. This is why people will say, may I be born in another place where I can hear the Dhamma, right? Because the fear is that, oh, I might be born, I might not be able to hear the Dhamma, right? So it's a kind of fear of fear of missing out. FOMO of the Dhamma, right? So and while it's a much more skillful fear, I guess, it's still fear. So and fear is still really unskillful in many ways. So what I would say is that you can use that fear, say, okay, well, I might not be able to be in my Dhamma group, so I want to go to it. But then there will be some separation, maybe. Maybe you have to, get a job and you move to another state or something, whatever might be that you're separated from your Dhamma group. And then you will suffer. Because you had attachment to your Dhamma group, you had attachment to the people in the Dhamma group, and then you will suffer, and that'll be a good learning lesson. So this is the nature of things. This is simply the nature that we will be separated. Right? Even from Dhamma groups. Even from Dhamma groups, we will be separated, even from very skillful things. So we do our best to try to, create the causes and conditions that we will always be around our Dhamma groups. But we also have to accept that we will be separated from them as well. So the fear is the fear of separation. It's the fear of, not wanting to, especially when you are, thinking about future lives too, not just this lifetime. That fear can arise. So you can let that fear guide you, but don't let it control you. Two different things. Guide you towards being, skillful, but if it controls you, then even if it's the thought is a skillful reason, you'll end up doing unskillful things. So it's better not to have it control you.
Yeah, that's right. I guess it's an interesting question about is it weird, and I think it might be best if I'd rather know more context before answering something like that. Is it weird? Well, sure, it's very unusual. Very, very few people have that kind of a fear, but it doesn't mean it's bad. It's a weird as a connotation of bad. So, but anyway, I have to know more about the context of the situation and so on. Fear, yeah, right. Fear in general, you don't want to be controlled by your fears, but sometimes also you can listen to your heart a little bit and see, is this a wise fear? Such thing as kind of a like fear of the consequences of bad actions, for example. It's one of the two guardians of the world, for example. So, but you also don't want to be so like, or you don't want to be overwhelmed by that either. You want to be able to notice it and to use your wisdom with regard to it too. So maybe, but maybe a question like this is best answered in I would like to know more about the context before I would say it would add anything to what Bonnie J said.
All right. Joshi has a question here. I have a lot of thoughts about bad things other people say. Like I want to argue or get angry at them because I don't like their ideas, or they sound too abrasive, particularly in online spaces. How can I transform this fighting attitude into something that protects me? I also dislike metta practice because it's stressful and creates discontent, so I don't know what to try. So in terms of the Buddha says that bhikkhus, I do not dispute with the world. It is the world that disputes with me. A practitioner of the Dhamma does not dispute with anyone in the world. So you reflect on that. Why am I getting so involved? Why am I getting, agitated at other people's views? Why am I arguing with them on Twitter or whatever online space you're arguing with people on? Is that actually accomplishing anything? Is it doing any good? Or you reflect on this. This is why, I used to be involved in politics and all kinds of things. And I got to the point where it's like, this is a waste of time. I'd rather be a monk. but in general, though, no, it's think about this, right? Oh, the idea is they have a wrong view. I have a right view. My view is correct. Their view is wrong. I am the compassionate one. They're the horrible, evil one. And they need to know the right way of things. Right? Right then and there, you've created all kinds of suffering for yourself. You've built up an I. You've designated what is actually right and what is wrong in the world. Do you really think you know? You should question that. And you've set up barriers, right? You've done all of these things that will just lead to strife and fighting and arguing and debating. What comes out of that? Like I've noticed in my life, especially when I started becoming a meditator, like my mind would get into political debates with people I never even knew. Just like my mind would be like, okay, we're going to have a political debate. So you got to be sharp. And so my mind would just start literally having political debates. Like I'm at work, I'm like typing something. I'm like, why is my mind having political debates? let me focus on what I'm supposed to be doing. So this is a very important thing to reflect on the downside of doing all that. To reflect on the fact that you're not going to change anybody. You think yelling and posting a bunch of things on your Facebook, your Twitter is actually going to change anybody? It's not. Right? Everybody else is also tangled in their views. That's what the Buddha says. The Buddha asks, who will untangle this tangle? The world is a tangled set of views that we attach to, that we hold tightly towards. And in doing so, cause ourselves suffering and harm to others. Who will untangle this tangle? Oh, if you realize the suffering you're putting yourself through, you start to, let me start untangling this thing. This thing is no good. It's just going to cause me more suffering. I can't change other people. I can only change myself. Right? And I live in a world where lots of people have lots of different views on how things are. What am I going to do? Oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'll put them in camps and force them.